Hey, friends, welcome back to the podcast. We've got another great episode for you today. As always, I'm Jonathan, your co-host, alongside Alan Briggs here. And today we're continuing in the topic of culture. A few weeks back, Alan and I recorded one where we looked at healthy cultures, underperforming cultures, and unhealthy cultures. And we used professional football as an example. If you haven't listened to that one, you can click in the show notes below or right here on the screen if you're watching on YouTube and go back and listen or watch that one. And then today we're going to, as I said, continue that. We've got phenomenal culture expert and leadership expert Jenni Catron sitting down with Alan for another conversation where they're going to look at the importance of emotional intelligence, the impact of positive culture on overall organizational success, and sort of the definition of culture, what it is, what it isn't, and the markers of what makes a thriving culture and the necessity of a proactive culture plan. This is a fun episode. It is an important episode, and I think there are things to be taken away that we can all apply, whether you're in a $6 billion organization or you're running a small organization and you're just getting to a place where you're about to assemble a team. The culture, then the standards that you set will affect the trajectory and the health of your organization, whether you're moving up and to the right towards more health or down and to the left towards more unhealth. So sit back, tune in, and enjoy this episode of Stay Forth Leadership Podcast featuring Jenni Catron.
We get it. You're busy. You want to grow, and we want to help. You're passionate about your craft because it deeply matters to you. Your faith is important. It's your foundation. At Stay Forth, we coach leaders to avoid burnout, live and lead with clarity, purpose, and from a place of health. We want you to experience long-term impact. Welcome to the journey. Jenni, welcome back to the podcast.
Alan, thanks for having me. So good to reconnect. It's been too long.
Absolutely. I feel like we already had the best conversation. Now we're just letting other people in publicly to this. I think this is your third time, maybe over the years.
I think it probably is. Yeah, I think it probably is. That's fun. That just tells us we're both getting old, too.
Yeah, I was going to say rarefied air, but also we've been doing this.
We've been doing this a while.
And even speaking of that, I mean, you've done so many things within helping leaders develop. You've really made a shift to go all in on culture. So tell us about that shift. When did that happen? And why did you decide that culture was the thing you wanted to aim at?
Yeah, such a great question. And it actually has been a bit of a reflection of my work over the last 20-something years, of recognizing, obviously, leadership is still the crux of what motivates me every day, building healthy leaders and thriving teams. But what I began to discover is that the environment that leaders create radically impacts the engagement of a team. And that when I would look at, my own journey in the organizations that I've been a part of, and I would look at like other, whether it be ministries or organizations or businesses that I get to support, it really would come down to, we could have a fantastic purpose and mission and our why as an organization. We could build a phenomenal strategy. For years, I am a certified strategic planner, and for years I would kind of focus on that work. And repeatedly, what I would find is that if leaders weren't attending to their culture, to the environment for their team, it didn't matter how great the purpose, it didn't matter how great the strategy, they'd often just feel stuck. And, we do those strategic plans, and inevitably, 90% of the time, something would surface in a strategic plan that had to do with the care of the team. And so I just kept coming back to this over and over. And I reflected, Alan, I remember very vividly when I left the music business and went into church ministry full time. I'd come off of a season in the music business where I had like an 8-year run of a phenomenal team, great environment, great culture, didn't know it because it was my first job out of college. It was absolutely fantastic. We went through a corporate merger, and my experience went from amazing to awful. Like my last year in the record business was my least favorite year in the record business because my environment had changed. The leaders had changed, the team had changed, and overnight my job description hadn't changed, but the environment had changed. And so I took the job at the church in Nashville, and I remembered thinking, I am now in a seat, I was executive director, I am now in a seat where I am disproportionately shaping the experience the team is having. And I've had these two extreme scenarios, and I knew what it felt like for me as the team member in those two very stark experiences. And I said, I never want a team member who's on a team with me to not be thriving, to not be flourishing, to not have an environment that brings the best out of them and helps us all achieve the mission together. And so that kind of was that like kind of catalytic moment for me that made me go, as much as leadership is, the tip of the spear, the thing that I'm always like focused on, the environment we're creating as leaders is making or breaking the experience for our teams and therefore impacting our ability to achieve mission. And so that kind of became it. And over time, I've just invested in figuring out, what does it look like? How do you do it? Because everybody knows, what it feels like when you're in a great culture. You know what it feels like when you're not in a great culture. But most of us are like, well, how do you do it? Do you just have a couple of staff fun days? Do you, throw a few perks at everybody? No, actually, there's a whole process. There's a whole system that supports healthy culture. And I just became committed to figuring out, hey, how do we define this to help equip leaders to do it?
So much there. We'll dive into it. Let's start with definition. Such a buzzword right now of culture. How do you define culture?
Yeah, my definition of culture is clarity of who we are and how we work together to achieve our mission. So there's three really critical statements there that I'll just break down quickly. Clarity of who we are. That's the like, what is our mission? What is our vision? What are the distinctiveness, especially in ministry context? Every church has a similar mission statement, but what are the distinctives about how we reach our community? What sets us apart? What makes us a little different? How has God equipped us as an organization to best live out that mission? So clarity of who we are. How do we talk about our uniqueness as a team? Then how do we work together? What are the values, the beliefs, the behaviors, how we show up as a team? And you'll hear a lot from me, and the word clarity is the first word in that definition, clarity of who we are and how we work together. That clarity of not just instinctively feeling it and assuming it, but we as leaders are really defining, this is how we show up. This is what's unique to us. But then it's all in service to the mission, which is the third phrase of the definition. Because a lot of times I think we think culture and we think, oh, it's just the kumbaya, it's just making everybody happy. Yes, yeah. But in actuality, we're a team on a mission. So it has to be in service to the mission, or it's just a social club. And I think that's the distinctiveness that I think sometimes, leaders tend to roll their eyes when they hear culture because they're like, oh, I'm so tired of placating to the team and trying to make them happy. No, actually, it's all in service of the mission. We're trying to bring that clarity that helps everybody know, here's how we do this work together. And the greater clarity we bring, the more confidently our teams contribute.
Yeah, and the longer we're in an environment, the harder it can be to name the distinctiveness of that, because it's just, hey, I've lived in New Jersey for years, or I've lived in Colorado for years, or I've lived in California, Southern California for years, and you forget that this is actually a unique place until you fly somewhere else, talk to somebody from Montana. And you're like, whoa, okay. Or they visit and tell you how different it is. I was recently talking with a senior leader, and they said, this year we really want to name what is different, what is distinct about our culture, but I don't think I'm in the place to name it as the person who's been here a really long time at the very center of the org. How would you go about that senior leader, enlisting a group of people to actually name the distinctives of the culture?
Gosh, and I love his awareness on that, because that's the challenge, right? For all of us, especially if you're a more senior leader in the organization, you've been there a long time, particularly if you're the founding leader. Like, it feels great to you because you shaped it. It's so much a reflection of you. And that's not a bad thing. But the hard part, and I've worked with a lot of leaders around this, is that we have to work to actually articulate it and name it. And I've done this with my own team at Foresight. It's like things that feel obvious to me are not always obvious to the rest of the team. And that's where I have to work to go, okay, this is what I mean. This is what it looks like, putting actual words and definition to it. So to answer your question for that leader, I think the humility of recognizing, hey, it's hard for me to get a true assessment of where we are and even help us define who we want to be, because I'm too close to it. It's like everything. When you're too close to it, you need other eyes to help you, see more broadly. So I think I'm a big advocate of third-party people helping come in and just ask good questions and bring perspective. But I love, you named this, like bringing a team around you of, one of the things that I map out in the framework that I have is build a culture team. and gather people from throughout your organization who are in different roles, have different responsibilities. Don't bring your usual suspects, which is probably your executive team or, your handful of like go-to people who you just can count on all the time. Not that you exclude them entirely, but you actually like bring people that reflect the best of who you are from throughout the organization. So a lot of times I'll be working with teams and we'll have somebody from the facilities team, we'll have an admin person, and we'll have somebody that's brand new to the culture that's only been there 60 days or so. We'll have your some of your core team members that have been there and long tenured, but you want this mix of people who are bringing different perspectives that can say, hey, this is who we are at our best. This is what's distinct about us. This is what I noticed when I came on the team 60 days ago. Here's what drew me here. Here's what I found so compelling. Here's what I noticed. And so getting those different voices around the table to do just an honest assessment actually is really life-giving. I think there's always a little fear around it because you're like, ooh, what will people name? What am I not aware of? And I think you have to wrestle that as a leader. But it's also really rewarding to hear what other team members see and what they reflect and find that continuity as you begin to define, hey, this is what's distinct. This is who we are. And so that would be a great starting point, is that team of people that can help speak into it.
I really believe that most leaders do want to create an amazing culture. And you actually say that you need a plan to do this. This isn't reactive or responsive. It actually has to be proactive. Talk about that. How do you actually create a culture plan?
This is probably my biggest aha, but it's probably not that surprising in that I'm a strategy girl through and through. Like, you give me a goal, I'll build you a plan. And that's what I found. It feels counterintuitive because when we hear culture and we think about creating environments for our team, particularly in ministry, we're thinking relational. Like, because we're naturally relational, oftentimes in ministry. But just like every other key initiative needs a plan to help sustain it, culture needs a plan. Like the culture you have, because you have one, whether you're conscious of it or not, like there's a culture, there's an experience that people are having within whether it's your staff team, your volunteer teams, and even more broadly to your congregations. But there's a culture, there's an experience people are having. And being intentional to say, hey, what is it about that culture? Like, what is distinct to us takes a lot of intentionality. And then we have to say, that's an outcome. Like, whatever we're experiencing, it's an outcome of whatever we've been inputting. Like, so you could say you already have a system that's producing the culture you want. You just haven't intentionally designed that system. And that's what my framework kind of unpacks that. It says, hey, we've got to assess, where are we? What's just true right now? Good, bad, like what's true about our current culture? Define, what do we aspire to? Like, what is the best of our culture? What are the things, who are we and how do we work together? What does that look like? And then building a plan to close the gap between those two things. And so that's the starting point of helping leaders go, you know what, actually culture, we can't just leave it to chance, because it's either happening by design or by default. And if we want to actually achieve the mission we're called to, I think stewarding our greatest resource, which is, in my opinion, the people that God has assembled and brought around us in this season to achieve that mission, stewarding that talent intentionally, you have to have a plan to do it. And so, and we could talk more of the how, but the why of the importance of a plan for that, I think, is just about intentionality. It's about stewardship. And I think sometimes we think, oh, it's, we're going to take the relationship out of it, or we're going to strip it down to just like this boring process. Not at all. Like, the plan actually becomes really fun and really life-giving because of the purpose it's for.
And how many times, Jenni, does it come from the person at the top in that org chart, or somebody in an auxiliary role, or somebody else on, like, say, the executive team?
Yeah, your senior leader needs to be involved, because, everything rises and falls on leadership, and our leader is shaping culture. So they've got to be a part of it enough to embody it, to embrace it. I'm working with a team right now that's working through their values work. And they're in the process where they're saying, hey, we've got to take this back to our senior pastor and make sure he's really feeling confident in what we've defined, that he feels like he can own it. And it's absolutely appropriate. This is a pretty large church. So they have one of their executive team members is leading the culture team. And then they've pulled together a team of individuals from throughout the organization. So my recommendation is that there's somebody at your highest level of leadership, somebody on your executive team who is waking up every day feeling responsible for the plan, right? That they're responsible for implementing the culture we've defined and making sure that the senior leader is included and is appropriately a part of it and appropriately supports it. So that can look different. Sometimes that's for me, when I was an executive pastor, I was our culture champion because I just was so passionate about it. And it was just part of what was in my job description. In other cases, it might be somebody else, but having somebody who has that influence at the highest level, who can be the champion of it, is really critical.
Yeah, it makes sense. What are some markers of a great culture? And then on the other side, what are some markers of poor culture?
Great cultures have provide great clarity, and let me unpack this a minute for you, Alan, because this was, and I know you know a lot of this stuff because you live in this world as well. But the aha to me as I was digging into building out the framework and doing some different case studies was that we often think trust is like the foundation of good culture, and and it is a incredibly key component of great culture, right? We need trust in organizations. So, but trust is more of a byproduct. And so, so when you ask what are some of the indicators of great culture, well, absolutely, like high trust, good communication, connection, team members that are like actively engaged and giving their best, not just quiet quitting or phoning it in. But below that is behaviors that we as leaders need to embrace in providing clarity for team members, clarity about their role, their responsibility, how they contribute, our goals, our mission, our vision. Like there's a number of things organizationally that we need to provide clarity on that actually create a measure of trust that help team members know how to confidently engage. And that's the thing that I found continues to unlock really great organizations, and where I see the strongest cultures are where leaders have this incredible sense of the power of providing organizational clarity and the support that that creates, or the trust that it builds, so that team members more confidently engage. And so I use that word clarity frequently because the best cultures I see have leaders who are almost obsessive about providing organizational clarity, because that organizational clarity builds a measure of trust that then the other things that we're hoping for, connection, belonging, engagement, all of those things flow from. If that makes sense.
Hey, do you ever feel like it is harder to sort of hit the markers that you set for yourself? We all take goals, we all write things down. We have things that we know that we need to do, things that we want to do, and things that just have to get done. And sometimes it's harder to invest in getting them done. It just feels like, I have mud or fog in my brain. I know that the way I feel means, man, I feel like I should have gotten a lot more done. First of all, don't ever shit on yourself. But second of all, it's okay. You're doing a hard thing. Leadership is hard. The demands of your life outside of work and the demands that happen within your vocation are challenging, and they expect and they require a lot of us. I've struggled with this my whole life, and staying on task and sort of living in the tension of pushing the needle to get as much done as I can without overburdening myself, paying attention to how I feel versus what I'm executing on, and sort of to maintain a healthy rhythm and a healthy balance there. One of the things that's helped me sort of reclaim my brain and amp up my focus without, the jitters of like caffeine crashes and sugar crashes is Magic Mind. It's simple. I've taken it for over a year now. And when I say practical is important to me. I'm on the move when it comes to working, and during the week, I'm moving fast. I try not to rush. And Magic Mind has helped me approach my day-to-day with a greater sense of calm, with a heightened sense of awareness, and just a better approach to getting the things done. It's not the only thing that I do. It's not the only discipline that I have, but it is the most practical discipline and tool that I've added into my leadership tool belt. And I'd love for you to give it a try. You can use code Briggs at checkout. You can click the link below over to magicmind.com. We've got an exclusive deal for you. It's worked for me. It's worked for countless others. My friends have noticed it in me. And I've even had friends that have started taking it that have noticed the same thing. So don't take my word for it, or do. Head over to magicmind.com. Use code Briggs at checkout. You can find all the information in the show notes below. And check out Magic Mind today. You can reclaim your brain. And if you don't like it, they have a money-back guarantee.
To flip that around then, what are some of the phrases that people use on the way out when they just, the culture's not for them? What are some of those marker statements?
That's a great. I would say they will often, I didn't feel welcomed here. I didn't feel like there was my gifts were needed. I didn't connect well. I'm trying to find the best language around this. I didn't connect well with my leader, and sometimes they're just silent. Typically when they're leaving for a culture reason, it will be because they didn't feel like they could speak up or speak into something. So again, that's where it might not show up on an exit survey because they've already felt like they don't have a voice, right? They already feel like leaders here don't listen.
So why should I fill out an exit survey? Nothing's even going to change. It's a catch-22.
That's exactly right. Like typically they're thinking, now, there's room to say, were they aligned? Were they a good fit? But oftentimes when somebody's leaving because of a concern about culture, they've already given up on any hope that they would influence or change it. And so I have a dynamic right now with an organization, and there's a leader that's raising a concern in the culture. And this leader expressed that, I know that other people have left for this reason as well, but nothing showed up in in exit surveys. And so now I'm trying to dig in and going, I have, everybody has their perspective or their interpretation, right? So I'm kind of trying to filter all of this to say, if this was true and it's been a recurring theme of why people have left this organization, why is nobody talking about it on their way out, right? And again, that my suspicion there is that they're like, leaders don't care. And that's a phrase you do hear a lot when cultures aren't in a great place and people are exiting as leaders don't care. They're not listening. They don't want feedback. And so those are some things I'm hearing, and as I'm talking to organizations where you see a repeated pattern that indicates there's something not quite healthy in the culture.
So let's scoot that up to the spot where you maybe can change something. They're already gone. They're already resigning. They've quiet quit or actual quit. What would be maybe some statements if I'm a lead at an organization that should alarm me that our culture is off?
You know what? Almost, Alan, it's almost more the posture and the behavior of the team, even more than what they say. In that you'll get the, okay, and they don't have a lot of commentary. Like maybe, there's direction or there's a decision, and they're starting to shut down. They're starting to not give feedback in one way or shape or form. And it's because, again, they don't think anything is changing or anything's going to be different. You will have some people who are more like kind of champions of the culture who will start pointing out things that feel off. But they're the brave ones who feel like they can, right? Like they're the brave ones who feel like they can actually call it out. What I find more and more is that when cultures are going in an unhealthy direction, team members get more and more quiet. They've learned that I shouldn't speak up because I'm probably going to get shut down on that. If I say something about this, they're going to tell me, no, it's not like that. Or that's just you, or there's a reason for that. Like when leaders are excusing things away, those team members will begin to just say less and less. And so That's the tricky part, because I think sometimes we're not even picking up on, when we're in more senior leadership seats, we're not even picking up on people are starting to just quit trying because they don't think there's going to be any, um, it's going to have any impact. And so that's the thing that, like, when I'm going in and working with organizations, I'm usually listening for almost what's not being said, right? Like, where are they just kind of going with the flow? And they're like, that's not worth addressing because it doesn't change. So I don't know if I'm quite getting at your question, but it's super tricky because you're paying attention to patterns of behavior that are changing, right? Or are so prevalent that, again, they're producing an outcome we don't really want, but oftentimes we don't know what's not being said. That's the thing that I think it's the hardest thing to mine for as leaders, because the reality is, for us in senior leadership, our culture is never as good as we think it is. Right? The experience that we have, yeah, it's super painful, right? So this is I'm part of the reason why I laugh, because I'm like, "God, why do you have me doing work that's, like, so sensitive?" Right? Like, because for some I think you said this earlier, I don't think there's any leader who doesn't want a great culture, right? Like, we want our teams thriving, but the reality is, there's no perfect culture. Every culture has work to do because we're a bunch of imperfect humans trying to do this work together. But we've got to be curious enough to say, "I know it's not as good as I think it is, because whatever I'm experiencing, I have a lot of control over." And it's different throughout the organization. So I've got to be willing to be always appropriately paranoid about how my culture's doing, right? Just appropriately paranoid of, "Hey, how is it really? Like, what is the experience really like?" And, if I can maintain that curiosity and trying to keep the feedback loops open, that's the hard part, because as soon as they stop giving feedback, in my opinion, they're halfway out the door. Because they don't feel like they don't have influence or voice in the organization. And not that every suggestion or every piece of feedback they have is 100% right, because I think that's sometimes where leaders go, like, you know, I've got to listen to everything they say. No, we just have to hear what they say and hear their perspective, because it's giving us data. And then we can say, "Hey, I appreciate that. I appreciate your feedback on that. Here's why we're going to do this instead of this." I had a situation with one organization where they had finally created some feedback mechanisms. Their culture had shifted or drifted to a place where they weren't getting feedback, and there was a lot of frustration within the team. We course corrected and created an environment where the leaders were receiving feedback more, but then the leaders weren't always acting on that feedback, because it may or may not have been the right next step or the right decision. But they weren't circling back to the team to say, "Hey, we heard you. We really appreciated what you shared. Here's the direction we went, and here's why." So they weren't closing the loop on the feedback. And so then the frustration was, well, now we've given the feedback and they just don't listen to the feedback. And so, there's the emotional intelligence part of this work is so key.
Yeah, I sat with a leader recently, Jenny, that basically said, "Well, I don't want to ask for feedback in this area because it's not up for grabs." And that would basically be, just patting them on the back and say, "We really want your feedback, but actually we don't." And so, maybe what's one step below that? Could it be input? Is that you need input, or you just can't guarantee that you're going to make changes from that? Or how do you deal with that weird tension of feedback?
Yeah. Well, and I love that, because that great awareness from that leader to say, this isn't really something that's going to work, that, like, they had clarity about what they were going to do or not do. Um, and I think naming that. I think the other thing is, sometimes we're afraid to just say that, "Hey guys, I'm making a decision here. We're going in this direction. I realize some of you might have different opinions on that, and, I'm welcome to hear your thoughts, but but this is a direction I feel really strongly about, and and just clearly saying, 'Hey, we're going in this direction.'" I think if I mean, that leader's exactly right. Like, if you opened it up for feedback and gave the perception that you were going to take that data to help you make the decision, but you're absolutely not doing that, then that's actually more detrimental. So I think that uh, intentionality of just being hyper clear about, where you do need feedback, or, hey, you know what, guys, I want to get your input on this. I have a pretty strong suspicion of the decision I'm going to make, but I want to hear from you before I make that decision. It might not change the decision I'm making, but I just at least want to hear from you, so I'm making sure I'm not missing something. Well, all of a sudden you've set the context of, hey, I may or may not, be acting on your feedback, but I want to make sure I've got it in mind before I make a decision. And again, I think sometimes we're afraid to be that honest with our teams, and they can handle it. The more clear we are, the more honest we are with the appropriate levels of information, um, they ultimately feel respected in that. And I think that's the piece sometimes we miss, is that out of a desire to not discourage them, we actually create more frustration.
Yeah, and just to clearly say, hey, this is not up for grabs because it's connected to our vision and our mission, but this is, and I need feedback here on that. Or we're going to do this, but I'd like some feedback on how it's done. Can you help me shape the process so we don't do this or whatever? And you're right, teams kind of breathe easily of like, yeah, I can handle it, versus the other side of like, man, they're just so confused, right? That is the ultimate lack of clarity, is I actually thought I had sway here and I didn't. So that's really good. Is there anything maybe like in weekly meetings or one-on-ones that can be sort of a regular little pulse or flow of that, so it isn't just relying on some, quarterly survey or something like that?
Yeah, that's good. That's good. So one of the things in the whole framework I've built around culture is looking at your existing rhythms, so from those weekly meetings, your one-on-ones, your, all staff or quarterly events, or whatever your rhythms are for being with your team. How are you reinforcing the clarity of who we are and how we work together? So how are you reinforcing what's good? How are you celebrating and calling out when team members live into that best version of who you are as a team? And in that also, so sometimes the best reinforcement of culture is celebrating when people are actually giving feedback around their positive contribution. So that's another form of feedback, is saying, a lot of teams I'll work with will do shout outs in all staff meeting of like, hey, I saw so and so live out our mission this week by doing XYZ. I saw this person living our values when they did this. And those positive reinforcements are also a mechanism of feedback of saying, hey, this you're contributing in a positive way to the health of our team. So that's a mechanism for feedback, coupled with, in one-on-one meetings, just ending the conversation with, hey, is there anything I need to know that I might have a blind spot around? Right. And making that normal, making that common in your one-on-one meetings, where your one-on-one meetings are an opportunity to connect, to, relationally connect with your team members, to let them, get input and insight from you on the things they're working on, you giving them feedback, but then equally inviting feedback. And I think leaders often assume, well, they know they can give me feedback. No, you actually have to tell them. You actually have to open that conversation frequently. And so in like a one-on-one setting, saying, hey, any feedback you need to give to me, maybe there's a specific event or something that occurred in the past week and you're like, how did that land? Did, anything I need to know about how the team received that or how you experienced that? So looking for those little micro moments of like just opening the door for the team to give you feedback. And if you're doing that consistently and you're not reacting defensively every time, then your team's going to get comfortable with being able to give you real-time input on how they're doing, what they're experiencing, etc. So you're just looking for those, where can I rhythmically do this, so that it's not episodic or surprising, because when we spring hey, we want to do a survey and see what everybody thinks. Everybody's on guard going, why do they want this? We don't normally do this. What is this about? But if you're doing it consistently, so I'm a big advocate of, and part of my process is annual surveys of the staff. Well, the first one you do is going to be clunky and they're not going to give you really good information because they're going to be uncertain of it if it's not been a rhythm. But as soon as you start doing that rhythmically, like as soon as they know, oh, we do this every year, it's not a bad thing. It's actually a positive thing. Then, doing that with consistency communicates to the team that we actually do want to keep learning. We do want to keep growing. So the rhythms are key.
Little bit of a case study I thought would be kind of fun to maybe get your perspective on. Literally from a coaching session this week, we have an organizational leader, a team of, I don't know, maybe 16 or so, and they're really wanting to put more structures in there, run an operating system, and it could be a pretty major jolt for this team. This leader moves quickly. They want to just like, let's put this, set it and forget it, kind of thing. Which clearly we just can't do that. How long, if you're me, would you tell that leader that they just need to stay on it every single week and every single month before they maybe notice the culture really change over time?
Great question. And this is the hard part, right? Like one of the phrases I use constantly with my clients is patience and persistence. Patience and persistence. Because the challenge whenever we're changing something for our team is that we're often expecting behavior change. And behavior change is not easy change. Behavior change is I've been used to doing things a certain way, and now you're asking me to do it differently, and that feels clunky. I don't fully understand it. It's going to take time for me to really see the fruit of it, both as the individual and then as the leader. And so it depends on the nature of the change, but a minimum of 6 to 12 months, and you'll start seeing some of those adjustments where you're starting to live into whatever new process you're implementing or change you're making. Sometimes it can be longer than that depending on how stark and severe the change is. But when I'm working with leaders, especially on culture work, it's like my um preference is 12 months. I want to work with you for 12 months because it just takes time to make the adjustments, make those shifts, and like consistently stay after the change that we're trying to lead through.
Yeah, those are good words, patience and persistence, because you're in no man's land. You've already committed. You've already invested time and energy and money. You've already said to the staff, we're doing this. And not only have you not seen results yet, but you may be really tired because you're doing a lot of work on something underneath the ground. And it's, leaders in that no man's land, I don't know anything better than your patience. Yeah, that's right. Patience and persistence, because a personal change, you can change from, the full focus planner to the right side up journal quickly and start to see results. The moment you bring multiple layers, multiple people, and maybe even multiple decades, the longer it's been around, I'm sure it takes longer. But I think that's fair to say, do this for a year before expecting maybe some major behavioral change. Any other thoughts on that when leaders are living in that gap?
Yeah, I think the self-awareness piece is so critical because I think as leaders, and I mean, and I say this because this is absolutely how I'm wired. I am a fast-moving, like to make it happen, make a quick change type of leader. Like I am born for early growth stages where you can move quick and fast. But as soon as your organization and your team are growing, and you said there's 16 people on this team, you can no longer just pivot and expect everybody to adjust immediately. Like, again, there are ingrained behaviors, there are patterns, there are ways that we work that you're now trying to disrupt. And our human nature is to go back to what we know and what's comfortable, even if it wasn't actually serving us well, right? Like, so that patience and persistence, as a leader first of all, not get discouraged because you're not seeing overnight change. I think we've got to right size our expectations because we often we're able to make those adjustments quickly ourselves. And so we expect that everybody else can move quickly with us. But part of being a leader is the one who sees the possibility and is going to go first. But, one of my favorite analogies around this, Alan, is that my husband loves hiking. And so at some point we've got to come out and do some hiking with you guys.
Come
But
on.
like,
We got a few mountains out here.
you got a few mountains. When we lived in California, for him, hiking all the 14ers was the thing, right? But he could hike twice as fast as me. But his vision was wanting to summit together, right? Like he was like, hey, going together is much more rewarding, is much more enjoyable. But it required patience and persistence on his part, right? Like he had to slow down and equip me for the journey, like help me know what to anticipate, what to expect, how to navigate the gear that I was going to need, how to learn how to self-arrest and like all the different things that you need to do if you're going to do some legit hiking. He had to slow down and make sure I was equipped to do that, right? So even though he knew how, he needed to make sure I was equipped for it. Then he's mapping out the route, he's charting all the things, but then when we start hiking, he's just a couple steps ahead of me, right? Like he could be running way ahead just because he's more capable, but instead he adjusts his pace to be a few steps ahead of me to help, continue making sure we're going the right way and charting the course, but not so far ahead of me that it discourages me and I don't feel like I can keep up or I can't do it. And so there's just so much that I learned from that experience as a leader is that great leaders adjust their pace to bring people with them. And that's what we have to remember when we're leading through change in our organizations is that we have to adjust our pace, which means we're probably going slower. We're over communicating things that feel obvious to us, but we're just constantly reminding everybody. We're patiently and persistently equipping them with what they need to know to remind them of why it matters, to make sure that they still see the vision. Like, this is where we're headed. This is where we're going. This is why it matters. This is how it's going to produce different or better results for us. And so there's a discipline, a self-awareness and a discipline required of us as leaders. It's a different type of leadership than that just gung-ho early phase leadership that we just are driving. All of a sudden, when that team gets to that size, we have to make some adjustments, but ultimately we're gonna go further. We're gonna get there more unified if we go together.
That's good. We started, Jenni, with your why in terms of why this matters, why you kind of gone all in on this. And I thought it would be good to actually end with why, but the why for the leader. I know that you believe that good culture can change our environments, change our families, and ultimately change the world. So give your best case to the leader listening as we close on why this matters so deeply. You cannot afford to not see this.
So good. So good. Yeah. Again, at the end of the day, the responsibility of leadership is to change or affect the lives of the people we lead and serve. That's actually the definition of influence, is to change or affect the lives of others. And that's the extraordinary opportunity that we have, that if we have embraced the role and the responsibility of leadership, we have embraced the stewardship of the people that have been entrusted to us. And that is an absolutely extraordinary gift. It is absolutely an extraordinary gift to have the privilege of leading a group of people for a season in pursuit of a mission together. And that's the heart of the culture work, is the stewardship of people in pursuit of a mission. That we're saying, how can I create an environment where people are clear about how they engage the work that we're doing? They are equipped to do that work well. They are connected. They have deep, meaningful relationships with the people that they're working with, and they are fully utilizing the gifts that they have to help us collectively achieve this mission together. The joy of that, and we've all been there. Everybody listening can probably name a team that they've been a part of that was absolutely life-giving. And that's the environment we want, because it's what we want to experience. We want to be a part of a team that is absolutely growing, thriving, and unstoppable in accomplishing the work that we want to do together. And that's why this work matters so much.
Amazing. Jenni, so grateful for your work.
Thank you.
Really grateful that you have niched down on this. And I'm excited to send people your way. Friends, your first step is grabbing her book. If any of this resonates, I promise you that great cultures ultimately change the world. We're talking about healthy leaders here on the podcast, but man, to be able to have a series of leaders that are creating this healthy, unified culture is beautiful. So close to our hearts here. So pick up her book, Culture Matters. Jenni, great to have you here. And thanks for that labor of love of you putting that whole book together.
Alan, thank you so much. And thanks for all you're doing to equip leaders. Like, it is such a gift to serve leaders, and you and your team do that so well. So thank you.
Yeah, right back at you. Keep up the great work.
So, hey guys, before we get you out of here, I just want to say, one, thanks for tuning into this episode. Jenni is phenomenal. The perspective that she brings with leadership development and the practicality of it is great. She's a great friend to stay forth, and we always love the chance to get to sit down and talk to her, and we hope that you have found a valuable piece of information here. Quite simply, one of my favorite takeaways is, the environment leaders create impacts team engagement. You've been called to do a hard thing, and when it comes to being the director or the guide for the health and the culture of your organization, it starts with you. And so the things that you're doing from a self-leadership perspective and the self-leadership standpoint are going to carry out into the lives and the roles and the health of those around you. And that's going to impact the culture. So the environment you set is going to impact the health of the organization. So last but not least, I want to invite you, as always, our sister organization, Sabbatical Coaching Group, hosts phenomenal webinars every month. They're not just content downloads. They're a great learning experience. The discussion's always great. And we host these around the topic of demystifying sabbatical. The term sabbatical is becoming more and more commonplace in our culture, both within faith-based organizations and even secular organizations. Harvard Business Review even released an article recently about the importance of sabbaticals and how everyone benefits. And so we would love to invite you. You can click the link below. The next webinar will be on March 19th at 12 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. You can find all the information over at sabbaticalcoachinggroup.com/webinars and trainings, or click below. Sign up today. It is no cost. Bring yourself, bring your entire team. We would love to have you there and bring some clarity on what a sabbatical is, what it isn't, and how an entire organization will thrive when a healthy, properly planned sabbatical program is implemented within the organization and when a leader takes a properly planned sabbatical. With that, we'll see you right back here next week for another episode of Stay Forth Leadership Podcast.